Okay, so this is the second in the series of the webinars to empower the researchers on the continent, and not just empowering them in the sense of building their research capacity as well as the career development of researchers on the continent. So the first one we had in October 2024, which was focused more on doctoral studies on the continent. Today, our focus will be on advancing postdoctoral research in African universities, and I'm happy to co-convene this with Dr. Palesa Mutapo, who I will be introducing shortly because she would be giving our first talk. Just to give a brief background, this is a very topical issue, and we had over 250 registrations from across the globe, 15 countries in Africa, and covering all of the regions from Algeria in the north to South Africa, Zimbabwe in the south, Uganda, Kenya in the east, and Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, etc. In the west of Africa. So it's a topic of interest, and we have people who will be joining us today who are postdoctoral researchers, would have people who are senior academics, would have PhD students who are looking forward to postdoctoral research, and as well as funders and people who are in the industry. So to kickstart our conversation today, I will be introducing our speakers as we go on to each of the sessions that they will be talking. But it will be my pleasure now to start by introducing Dr. Palesa Mutapo, who is a director of research support at Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, and she's the founder of Pan-African Postdoctoral Research Network. Palesa is an advocate for postdoctoral research, and she previously headed the postdoctoral support unit at Stellenbosch University and became the deputy director of that center before she joined Nelson Mandela University. So Palesa will be talking about exploring the postdoctoral training landscape and the support systems within African University. So over to you, Palesa. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Yinka.
I will stop sharing, and you can share your screen if you want.
I'm not sharing a screen.
Okay, perfect. Go for it.
I'm not sharing a screen because we're supposed to have a conversation, and we have a panel after this, and we'll have question and answers at the end of the session. So I think all of the aspects, looking at the type of comments and questions that were asked, will be much more easier to discuss them towards the end when we've had our panel. And I just wanted to share, okay, hi everybody, my name is Palesa Mutapo, and I'm currently the Director for Research Support and Management at Nelson Mandela University. I've worked extensively supporting postdoctoral research programs and contributed to the national postdoc guidelines around supporting and managing and developing the career pathways for postdoctoral researchers in South Africa, and also aspects of it on the rest of the continent. And really, I wanted to just give just an overview, because we have one of our panelists who I've worked very closely with, who will be talking around specific postdoctoral support programs in South Africa, and how we've been trying to advance the advocacy on postdoc support, looking at postdocs as the next emerging leaders in academia and outside of academia, and how to advance their careers and create better support mechanisms for them within our various institutions. South Africa is a little bit different in terms of the support systems available in our national system of science and innovation, where there is directed research support, funding that is targeted for supporting researchers across the various institutions. We have the National Research Foundation. We have programs through the Department of Science and Innovation, through the Department of Higher Education and Training, that are targeted at building the next generation of academic leaders. But we also know that there's a huge challenge in terms of the positions and availability of positions in academic environments for postdocs or for people who want to join and to become academics. The academic system, is not really, there's not a high turnover in academia. And as a result, we have many, many young graduates, PhD holders who are sitting either in a long-term postdoctoral position. Like myself, I postdoc for quite too much, but it was necessary and useful in terms of advancing the career. However, in terms of opportunities for employment within academic settings, that has been one of the major challenges. In addition to that, is that the training that is provided to postdocs or people who have graduated their PhD hasn't really looked at aspects of transitioning the person outside of academia, or even innovating ways of employment within academic settings. We've discussed and tried to develop such programs, particularly on building skill sets for transitioning outside of academia, particularly on entrepreneurship, and also thinking about models where postdocs can create positions for themselves within a university or within an academic settings, where they would be able to bring their own resources into the positions. There's quite a lot of international funding programs that enable that to happen. For example, the Wellcome Trust has a funding for early career researchers where there's a salary component written into it. And so you're able to develop your career in parallel within an academic, if you are in a lab or in a department, you're able to pay your own salary through the Wellcome Trust, which comes with other funding for administration and running your research group, etc. So the idea really is that there are potential mechanisms that can be employed that can facilitate research activities of postdoctoral fellows, and ensuring that they become part of the research ecosystem, in that they already contribute to research. And that the value is not just the amount of publications that you produce, but your ability to augment some of the things that are happening, like the activities that are happening within a university setting. For example, to augment supervision. While you're doing supervision, you're also building your career as an academic, if that is your pathway. So when you're applying for a job and you want to be an academic, they're asking you about your supervision experience. And if you're not provided that during your postdoc, then you are not able to articulate that in a CV. In fact, you don't have the experience of supervision, which you need to build during the time of your postdoc as a time that is dedicated for building up your skill set as a future academic. Writing grants and being a host, a PI on specific grants, under the supervision of a mentor, means that you are building the skill set as well that is needed to be one of the best academics, is to be able to generate income for your research, to attract funding, to collaborate widely. But most universities do not have the support mechanism for postdoc. Not even, travel opportunities to enable them to go scope and meet other researchers who might collaborate with them now and in the future. One such area where this is not very well applied is for international research partnerships. And I'm glad that one of our speakers, Prof. Moro, will be speaking about, intra-Africa mobility and support around research activities. Is that, you need young researchers to participate in the partnerships for sustainability purposes, and to be able to grow the research focus areas in a partnership. And so making sure that postdoctoral researchers have the opportunity first, and also the space in which they can expand on their own ideas. If you look at many of the definitions of what a postdoc is, it says, after 5 years of getting your PhD, it's a focus period of building your research career, focus on research skill set, publications, writing grants, and all of the above, which make you an excellent academic, but also to focus on building capacity to transition outside. So you should be learning other tools, around finance management, project management, leadership, team management, communication, all of those things that when you look at them holistically, they can make an individual, a best candidate, whether they stay in academia or not. If those people who have had experience to postdoc abroad, you know very well that there you are treated as a staff member, even though, you're an early career staff member, but you participate in the academic activities of your department, of your faculty. You are essentially part of the research community there. In South Africa, this has been largely limited by the tax exemption with our there's a clause on the funding for postdocs, which means that postdocs also have to be treated as students, and the funding that they receive is a bursary so that they are exempt from tax. Please, can you make sure that people are muted? Okay, sorry about that. So because of that, then institutions, have to find a mechanism to support the postdocs within their spaces, without violating this regulation around tax. And as such, postdocs end up being on the student platform, on the student registration system, everything attributed to students. And so that takes away the prestige and the opportunity for this individual to develop as an academic. And often what you find is that, when a postdoc leaves a space, they have a lot of publications, but they haven't had any other experience of being an academic. And they don't have any experience even working with people outside their space. And so we need to create specific training or support programs that can enable that. One of our speakers that were meant to join us, and she cannot join us anymore, is Alan Mukwana from the Science Foundation for Africa, whom together we were supposed to come and discuss some of the support system, especially around the financial support of postdoctoral programs in universities, and expanding the model of postdoctoral training, where in South Africa, it's like a natural step to become a postdoctoral researcher. It's a natural step. You do a PhD, then you do your postdoc, and then you get an academic position. Whereas in other parts of the continent, it's not as easy as that. Most people will get a PhD and maybe go straight into a lecturer position, and then they do not have the time, an opportunity to build up their research skill set or any other training. And then often they will look for postdoctoral opportunities outside of their country. And then, of course, there comes issues around brain drain and lack, people don't return back because obviously you end up in a university that is highly resourced, and Yinka can confirm on this. You end up in a university where there's a highly resourced, you have a lab, you have access to everything, you can publish, your page fees are covered, you get to train, you get to do supervision, you get to write, you get to go to conferences. And so it's not to come back. And so we need a mechanism to support, and we need a mechanism to enable this kind of culture to develop. But also while we're developing that culture, we need space so that these researchers, talented as they are, can be able to contribute to the research ecosystem, particularly around the AU Agenda 2063's ambitions, and all these strategies that we're developing for the continent, which need young people, young researchers who can participate, not just for the innovation side, but also in terms of economic contribution. So how do we ensure that we put enough resources to develop a system of innovation and ensuring our researchers are able also to contribute to developing economic products, that also drive that economic growth on the continent. So I'm going to leave it here because we still have quite a few people who are going to share with us, and also that we've received quite a lot of interesting questions from you who registered. And we would like to, take the opportunity to address them maybe towards the end of the session. So I'm going to hand over to you, Yinka. Just for one note, please make sure that you keep your mic on mute You can introduce yourself in the chat, and we will be happy to share the recording later on. And also, if you have any questions, there's a question or chat option where you can put some questions. I'll keep an eye on those, and we'll be happy to engage with you. Thanks, Yinka.
Thanks very much, Palesa, for setting the scene for the next item that we have, which is the panel discussion. And I'm really delighted to introduce our speakers for the panel session. I will be going through them one after the other. So the first person I would introduce all the speakers, and then we will get into the activity during the panel discussion. So the first speaker that I would like to introduce for our panel discussion is Dr. Francois, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Research on Evaluation, Science, and Technology at Stellenbosch University. Interestingly, I am joining the call from Stellenbosch this afternoon. Dr. Francois is an editor and trustee of African Minds, which is a not-for-profit open access book publisher. His research is focused on research universities in Africa and scholarly publication, and importantly, on postdoctoral researchers. He's done some good work looking at the landscape and the profiles of postdoctoral research and researchers, and he will be sharing that insight with us today. Last year, he prepared the new guidelines for appointment, retention, and development of postdoctorates in South Africa. And that's really something commendable. So thanks very much, Dr. Francois, for joining us. The next person I would introduce is Professor Sharon Fon. Professor Fon is a full professor at the University of Witwatersrand, and she's also a visiting professor at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. She in addition to a professorial role, she's also the co-director of CARTA, which is the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, which is a consortium of universities, research institutions within Africa and universities also outside of Africa. CARTA is really involved in give me a moment to share this. So CARTA is really involved in empowering the next generation of. Could you, if you are not speaking, can you be on mute, please? Hello. So Professor Fon, as the co-director of CARTA, CARTA is involved in empowering the next generation through doctoral and postdoctoral research training on the continent. The next person will be, I will be introducing Dr. Boniface. She was a program officer at the African Academy of Sciences. The African Academy of Sciences has led and implemented several continental programs to train postdoctoral researchers, and Dr. Oshie would be giving us some insight into some of those programs and how the training models have been, and going forward, what postdoctoral researchers should be expecting on the continent. Last but not the least, to share insight on an individual program aspect will be Dr. Peter Kwashi, who is the Deputy Director of Research at West African Center for Cell Biology. It's a mouthful, WACBIP for short. WACBIP is based in Ghana and is one of the World Bank's African Center of Excellence with a mandate for training master's, PhD, and postdoctoral researchers in the area of tropical diseases. So thanks very much to our speakers on this panel session. So I will take down the screen and also now give opportunity for our panelists to give an introduction of themselves and what they've been doing and the organization have been doing in the area of postdoctoral training and then we can go on to other questions. So to start with, Dr. Francois, do you want to have a start, please? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Yinka, and welcome to everyone on the call. I think I'm going to deviate a little bit from what you proposed, and that's because my experience so far has been mainly in South Africa, but this is really a Pan-African event, so I don't want to speak too much about South Africa alone. I will come back to it at the end, but I'm going to start with just two observations that I think relate to Africa, and these are personal observations based on conversations I've had recently and some of the reading that I've been doing. And hopefully they can spark some further discussion and debate amongst the participants. So there are really three points, two related to Africa and one to South Africa. And the first in relation to Africa is that I think we have to acknowledge that universities are employing fewer rather than more permanent academic staff. This morning I woke up and I read on Times Higher Education that Cardiff University is retrenching 300 staff members. And this is throughout the UK, where there's a shortage of positions are being cut due to financial constraints. And that's obviously a very specific context. But just so happens last week, I met someone from University of Nairobi, an engineer, working on a project on doctoral education rather than postdoctoral education. And he told me that his department is half the size it was at its peak. So there are half the number of permanent academics. So academics are retiring, and the university is not filling those positions. So the department is shrinking. So I think, especially in the case of public funded universities, we have to face the grim, unfortunately, reality that there are not more opportunities that are opening up. And so the competition is getting stiffer for the few remaining positions. And this, of course, is a sobering reality for postdocs, especially those that expect to continue into an academic post. And I think that's, for me, is the key point, is we need to be very careful to manage expectations about what happens after the postdoc. The expectation that an academic career is automatic, or that your host or institution is going to create pathways for you, is highly unlikely. There are some universities that are doing this. I know, for example, at the University of Cape Town, they are creating tracks for postdocs into more permanent, not fully permanent, but more permanent positions. But of course, there's still limited spaces. There's not space for every postdoc to enter in this track. So they select the top postdocs. So I think, sorry to start with the bad news first, but I think that's important to note, that we can't expect all postdocs to end up in the university. Palesa spoke a little bit already about, skilling postdocs for other opportunities and moving into other sectors of the market, not only into universities. And I think that's really important. And I'll come back to that when I speak about the South African context. On a more positive note, and this is purely an observation, something that I'm quite keen to look at further and study, but I was in Nairobi at the end of November, and I met a very interesting group of people. They call themselves a research collective. Many of them have been at universities before, but are no longer associated or have permanent posts at those universities. And yet they are self-organizing and securing funding for research as a collective. So this is happening in a more informal space outside of the university. These researchers have more flexibility, more autonomy to decide what they want to study. They don't have the burden of teaching and administrative burdens that their colleagues face increasingly in the university. And so this is just a thought that this might be something that we could see more of. I've noticed the same phenomenon in Germany. So it's not specific to Africa, but it's just something to keep in mind, that you don't have to give up on a research career, but that research career for a postdoc may not always be in the university. And of course, it requires skills in terms of getting the funding, grant writing, managing money. All these things are required if you want to self-organize in this way. But it does appear to be happening. And this, for me, creates opportunities for postdocs rather than being a threat to them. So while the university is shrinking in terms of opportunities, there are possibly opportunities for postdocs outside of the university, and those can still be in research. They don't have to be in sectors that the postdocs weren't necessarily trained for. And then the last comment I want to make before I hand over is about the national postdoc policy guidelines for South Africa that Palesa referred to. I was involved in a process of consultation amongst practitioners, or call it a community of practice here in South Africa, postdoc administrators across all 26 public universities. We developed these guidelines because there's a set of regulations around postdocs that date back quite some time to 2013. And we realized that universities were all struggling to know what the regulations were. And there were huge inconsistencies across universities in terms of how they were managing their postdocs. One thing was common. They all wanted to grow their postdocs. All of them wanted more postdocs. Stellenbosch University has a target of 600 postdocs. So I think University of Johannesburg has the same. So everyone wants more postdocs, but none of the universities were really speaking to one another about how to get the most out of their postdocs and to support the postdocs. It's not just about extracting. I saw a piece of information today. We did a survey a while ago of postdocs. We got a response from about 500 of them. And 80% of them have contracts that require them to publish 2 journal articles. That's in their memorandum of understanding with their host. So that to me seems very extractive. So you get a contract if you produce 2 articles. That's the exchange. That's the agreement. Now, the reason I want to mention the guidelines in this call, which is around more than just South Africa, it's about postdocs in Africa, is that I think there has to be caution about following the South African example. And I would caution other institutions to use the guidelines as a reference, but not to take it at face value and to do more than what the guidelines are doing, because the South African context is very specific. And I'll mention 3 things that stand out for me, and they kind of overlap a little bit with what Palesa mentioned earlier in her opening remarks. The one is that there's certainly a lack of effective institutional support mechanisms and structures for postdocs. So postdocs often have memorandum of understanding with their host, and that is pretty much their only connection to the university. To the rest of the university, they remain largely invisible. And so their endeavor is fairly lonely and unsupported unless they have a very good host. So I think universities need to think about how they provide that support. When postdocs come to Stellenbosch, and NKU and Stellenbosch at the moment, you can see this is not a cheap place to live. So you're coming from Kenya, you're coming from Nairobi, or maybe you're coming from Nigeria, wherever it may be, and landlords ask you for 3 months deposit when you're seeking accommodation. Where do you find that money? There's no institutional support for that relocation. So if we want to encourage mobility, then there's a structural failure on the part of the university to provide that. So these are the kinds of things that we need to think about to support postdocs. I mentioned only one. There are, of course, many others. How to open a bank account, how to connect with other people in the university, how to find other postdocs. You would think that's obvious, but it's not immediately obvious. The second one is to facilitate more mobility and networking across the continent. I think this is a key way of establishing connections that can generate future work opportunities. But in the case of South Africa, and this is why I said don't follow the model, postdocs are generally seen as a publishing I'll say resource, but sort of publishing machinery. As I said to you, they all have to produce at least two publications per year. There's very limited opportunity to teach. It does happen, but it's not common. And there's some opportunity to supervise, although it's mainly co-supervision and mainly at lower postgraduate levels. Now, if you look at what the requirements are for postdocs when you want to apply for a position outside of Africa, they ask you for your teaching philosophy. They ask you how many hours you've taught. So if we don't provide postdocs with those opportunities, we're limiting their potential mobility and their networking opportunities. So we need to think carefully about what we expect of postdocs. What is the contribution of postdocs? Is it purely research, or are there a broader range of contributions that they can make and that are contracted into their agreements. And then the last point, which is highlighted in the guidelines, but is, I think, fairly weak in the South African context and should be given serious consideration in other African contexts, is the development of non-academic skills. It's not only about how to do research. Your PhD should, and I say should because it doesn't always happen, have prepared you for your postdoc in terms of how to do research. Perhaps not so much in terms of project management, managing multiple projects, how to budget. These are skills that I think postdocs really can benefit from if they are to pursue avenues outside of the university when their postdoc term comes to an end. So I'm going to leave my comments there and hand over to the next person. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Francois. Palesa, do you want to take it over from there? Thank you.
Okay. We have a quick switch over of our panel. We are actually going to go to our very, very last speaker for the day because of his crazy schedule, and he needs to be leaving very soon. So I would like to introduce Professor Bobby Moore, and he is the Consul General for the South African High Commission in Lagos, Nigeria, and currently he's stationed in Abuja, looking after both of the offices. He will need to be leaving soon, so I'm not going to spend too much time on his introduction. I would like him to come online and share about his topic with us. Please
Thank you.
join. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
You're audible. We can't see you.
You guys want to see me.
Very important.
It's important. Well, thank you very much, Palisa. Thank you very much. And I just want to express appreciation to the presenters and panelists for this opportunity to speak. I think this is a very interesting network. This is my first interaction with the network, and when I was reading about it, I thought this is where I belong, particularly if I juxtapose it to the work that I do here in Nigeria. Am I audible enough? Am I audible enough?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I think at the outset, let me just commend the Pan-African Postdoctoral Network for this initiative. Palisa are doing a great job. And I think it is only upon us as diplomats to complement the work that we do and look at the best way in which we can assist you in terms of driving this movement. I believe today we are not only gathered to deliberate on innovations about research and so on. And for me, as a diplomat, I think it's important that we recognize the work that we do as diplomats as the catalyst of bottlenecks that are faced by postdoctoral students in Africa, and also outline the role that we play in trying to deal with some of the challenges, particularly between South Africa and Nigeria. So I'll focus on the issue of visas and intra-Africa mobility, how we have fared and so on, because ours as the South African Consulate and High Commission in Nigeria, our role really is to encourage, support, and facilitate collaboration in higher education. Palisa can bear testimony to the fact that we were fully involved in the recently concluded, well, I call it the recent because that was the last visit and quite very successful, around July last year, where they visited the University of Lagos to sign an MOU of cooperation between the two institutions. And we were involved in that process, but we are quite very thrilled that part of what they had agreed to do is to encourage mobility between institutions of higher learning between South Africa and Nigeria, particularly amongst themselves. And this will see us increase the movement of academics, researchers, and scholars to both countries, particularly to these universities. And we look at ourselves as South African missions in Nigeria as key catalysts to enable this movement. It is our function to ensure that this movement is enabled and supported, particularly from the side of Nigeria. But we are acutely conscious of the fact that, development of higher education in Africa points to the phenomenon of migration of African academics, researchers, scholars to destinations overseas, and more recently to South Africa. We have seen an increase in the number of scholars from Africa and elsewhere descending upon our shores in South Africa. But this process is characterized by many challenges, which I believe, as South African missions abroad, have a very critical role to play, but also to demystify the stigma attached to, the difficulty with which visas are normally obtained from South African embassies. But in principle, visas and intra-Africa mobility are crucial for supporting researchers in Africa and throughout the world. But visa applications can also take several weeks or even months to process, and that also causes a delay in achieving the purposes for which collaboration has been made, And then furthermore, visa requirements can be stringent, including proof of sufficient funds, which is usually required. And I think the previous speaker spoke about the weaknesses that have been experienced in terms of funding postdoctoral students. And I think the same challenges are facing postdoctoral students. Insufficient amount of money in terms of day-to-day upkeep, visa fees, health insurance, police clearance certificates. It becomes very cumbersome because all these have financial implications. And sometimes the documents that you need as a scholar that are not easy to obtain. So we become a catalyst when it comes to that. And some African countries have limited visa options for researchers. There are countries that do not offer visas for postdoctoral students. And if you have a potential resource from a potential country, and that particular country does not have the necessary visa categories, it becomes very difficult for us to then participate in the migration process of those. So all these bottlenecks make it very difficult to advance the research objectives. And the African Union Protocol on Free Movement of Persons, Right of Residence and Right of Establishment aims to facilitate the movement of people, goods and services across the continent. Some African countries, of course, have implemented the visa-free policies for citizens of other countries, facilitating research collaboration and mobility, but still, some of the regulations are so cumbersome. There are usually challenges in terms of access to internet services in other African countries, unstable internet services, insufficient funding to visit institutions that are able to facilitate these visas, difficulties in setting up appointments, ambiguous regulations that are not quite very clear, and access to diplomats is usually very difficult because of their hectic schedule. So we have crafted a program here of consultation with everybody who wants to go to South Africa for whatever reason. We have briefing sessions, we have checklists, we dedicate days during the week within which we are able to brief potential postdoctoral students who are traveling to South Africa. We brief them about the do's and the don'ts of the visa application processes, policies that are involved, and the entire ecosystem that would make their experience quite seamless. And I must say that over the last 2 years, our missions in Nigeria have been streamlining visa processes in order to reduce processing times and facilitate research collaborations and implement research-specific permits. And we have been successful in terms of this. I wish I had figures in order to quantify the extent to which we have done that. But I think part of why we have been successful is the bias that I have towards research and academics. It's something of interest to me, and it's something that I've been pushing quite rigorously. And now colleagues are accustomed to the fact that when it comes to researchers, I think it's an area that is usually neglected by adjudication officers who deal with immigration issues. Most of the focus is biased towards your business visas as well as the tourist visas and other forms of visa. Little attention for many years has been paid. Little attention has been paid to not making sure that study visas are attended to. But now we have made tremendous strides, and I believe that we can do more than what we have done so far, but the numbers continue to increase. In the same vein, establishing research networks and collaborations such as your outfit, Palisa, I think it's a very great platform that really helps like-minded individuals and institutions to gather together and share ideas on how these bottlenecks can be unlocked. But that cannot be done without the involvement of stakeholders like ourselves, who continue to be guardians of the immigration laws of the country. And our commitment has always been very focused on postdoctoral students. But like I said, we have now accelerated that because we thought that our commitment to researchers and postdoctoral students has been limited. But now, because of the bias that I have indicated, we have now sharpened our focus. Similarly, there are quite a number of other institutions, outfits that are similar to yours that I think will play a very critical role in advancing this agenda of assisting intra-African mobility. You've got the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences, which is a network of mathematical science centers that also provides funding and support for researchers. And I think there must be very strong links between your outfit together with this. And you also have the African Academy of Sciences, which is also a Pan-African organization that aims to promote scientific excellence and collaboration against around the continent. So I think if we forge one movement working together with the diplomatic corps from various missions, we can make a very impactful contributions to the academic lives of those who want to pursue postdoctoral research. So these initiatives and programs demonstrate the importance of supporting researchers and facilitating intra-Africa mobility, promoting scientific collaboration and development across the continent. I think this is an area that has been neglected for a very long time because oftentimes when visas are issued, they are normally quantified in terms of the value that those visas will bring into the country. Now, of course, forgetting that the value that academics and postdoctoral students bring into a country is much more than what is being quantified monetarily. I mean, they bring skill, they bring innovation, they bring all other variables relevant to upskill inhabitants of a particular country and therefore contribute to the growth of the economy through those skills. And countries such as Nigeria are actually bringing rare skills into South Africa. This is why we are so much committed in ensuring that we do everything in our power to exchange those rare skills so that this knowledge can easily be imparted. And we do firmly believe that our ongoing contribution to positive migration does contribute to the attainment of the AU's Agenda 2063 and, of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So colleagues, having provided a brief context of our role as South African missions in Nigeria and various networks whose mandate we complement, I will now outline selected themes that are going to anchor my talk very quickly. I think it's important for us to recognize the strategic importance of Agenda 2063 for the prosperity of the continent, to contextualize intra-Africa mobility to facilitate research and development, and also look at the nexus between intra-Africa mobility, Agenda 2063, and UN Sustainable Development Goals. South Africa and Nigeria, as drivers of the African developmental agenda, quite very critical in the subject of intra-Africa mobility, particularly for postdoctoral students, for obvious reasons of collaboration and the skill that the two countries are sharing. The complementarity is the value that is going to be derived from these exchanges. That's why it pleases us as diplomats when universities in South Africa and universities in Nigeria are signing agreements of collaboration between themselves. We believe that, Chairperson, that Africa is the continent of the future. And in the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, Africa requires a strong team of scholars and researchers who are capable of utilizing technology to drive innovation, development, and create prosperity for Africans. And therefore, there's an urgent need to increase the number of African innovators in order to address local challenges with homegrown solutions, driving economic growth and improving. So until such time that we unlock the existing bottlenecks for postdoctoral students to move across the continent, it will be very difficult to achieve some of these aspects of Agenda 2063. Supporting effective intra-Africa mobility is crucial for achieving Agenda 2063, the African Union's vision for prosperous integrated Africa. And there are some of the ways in which effective Africa mobility can be supported. And I'm going to mention one or two of them. The harmonization of visa policies. South Africa has already been actively working to harmonize visa policies with other African countries. This is a step towards the right direction. We have ensured here in Nigeria that the visa experience of our applicants is exceptionally seamless. And I have also indicated that we have started offering the same service to an area that has been neglected for a very long time, which is postdoctoral students. There is also a visa travel regime, which allows visa-free travel for citizens of 16 African countries, including Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland. Unfortunately, at the moment, we do not have that arrangement with Nigeria. But it is also important to foster regional cooperation, encourage collaboration among regional economic communities to implement common policies and standards. In the case of South Africa, you have South Africa, which is in the SADC region. So if there was a cooperation agreement that were to be signed between your East African communities, SADC, West African, ECOWAS, communities of West African community, and so on, I think it would create a very seamless ecosystem throughout the continent of movement. You know, in West Africa, there's already an ECOWAS passport, which is used by members of the economic communities of West Africa. But I know that in SADC, I'm not quite sure whether there's a SADC passport, but I know that there's a SADC protocol that actually allows SADC member states to move freely amongst themselves. But whether or not there's a passport specifically for that, I'm not quite sure. East African communities as well, the same. And I think it would also be good to have a special visa dispensation for your academics and postdoctoral students because of the value that they bring into the country. Skills are something that you cannot easily buy, but it's easy to buy experience. If you're a tourist, you go to Cape Town, you come back, you experience that. But skill is something that has to be imparted. So it's important for us to travel this journey of supporting postdoctoral students in order for them to bring those skills to the best that South Africa has. So intra-Africa mobility remains crucial for achieving Africa's economic, social, and political integration. It's a matter that we take quite very seriously. I'm just about to wrap up now. I was desirous of taking a leaf on the experiences of South Africa and Nigeria. But in the interest of time and the fact that I have another engagement, I'm simply going to share this presentation with the good doctor here. But what I can say about South Africa and Nigeria for now is that both countries have a great task of supporting countries in the continent to grow their economies and reduce unemployment, poverty, inequality, and thus fulfilling the obligations of the Sustainable Development Goals as well as Agenda 2063. And now in the world, South Africa and Nigeria carry a difficult task of acting as advocates and vanguards of Africa. Therefore, the success of political and economic integration in Africa rests heavily on the shoulders of these two regional powers that have both collaborated and competed with each other in a complex relationship that is Africa's most indispensable. What these relations are based on and how they could further be improved is important for international relations in general and for the survival of their own diplomatic relations, therefore influencing the entire continent. Most importantly is how these relations can be harnessed in order to promote and accelerate people-to-people relations, making use of existing mechanisms and bilateral fora. Apart from being amongst the biggest economies in the continent with great influence, the two countries also share strong historical relations. And visas have always been a topical issue between South Africa and Nigeria, but because of these new mechanisms that have been developed, we sort of have created strategies within which we can unlock the bottlenecks. And of course, I indicated that all these courtesies will be extended to all prospective applicants from the cross-section of society. And in conclusion, I would like to say that in diplomacy, citizens of nation states are essential in determining the success of diplomatic relations between any two nations. It is therefore significantly important to create a conducive avenue through which people can interact and thrive at various levels. Remember that once we issue visas to postdoctoral docs, when they come to South Africa, not only are they there to impart knowledge and skills, but they are there to embrace, appreciate, and understand the cultural dynamics of the country. It is very difficult to embrace a culture that you have never been exposed to. For you to understand a particular culture, it is important to live amongst the community and be assimilated to a certain extent. And I just want to conclude by saying that by way of recommendation, I think it is important that funding is increased for postdoctoral students, and we should also improve and develop infrastructure and research facilities and the necessary equipment. We should also enhance regional cooperation, foster regional and international partnership, build sufficient capacity that can be supported, promote innovation hubs. We already have innovation hubs in South Africa, but the extent to which they are being used in order to complement the work of institutions of higher learning remains very unclear. Encourage entrepreneurship as well. You know, the value of your PhD or of your postdoctoral studies must add value to society. It must be quantified. The extent to which you contribute your academic studies to society must be of value to an extent that we can quantify the contribution and the impact that you have made into society. Another area that is important is to foster industry-academia links. More often, we engage in postdoctoral studies, and postdoctoral students find themselves without employment, and they only leverage on the number of publications that they produce in order for them to generate revenue. But other than that, there's no second layer leadership that plans for, there's no succession plan for them. So creating a very strong movement that collaborates with industry key players is very important, but also to choose topics for research that are of interest to the various industries. It's quite very important because those are solution-oriented topics that postdoctoral students will be contributing to. Developing policies and framework, establish supportive policies, legal framework, and intellectual property rights. The researchers who sweat and they spend sleepless nights working on research and so on, producing quality work, which is published, but there's no recognition or acknowledgement of the work that they do. All you see is plagiarism on the work that they've done. So there needs to be incentives for those who contribute. And their intellectual property rights must actually be protected because that's the only way through which they can also generate income because they are inherently unemployed, unfortunately. Addressing the issues of brain drain is quite very important. If you live in an environment where there are no incentives for your academic prowess, you are going to experience perpetual brain drain. So how do we begin to stop that from happening? Leveraging technology. The previous speaker spoke about funding. Funding is quite very important, especially in this present day of artificial intelligence, where most researchers do not have access to technology. Even a simple laptop to get access to it, or unstable internet connection, is quite important. So the movement must be, must be sure to focus on these issues. Focusing on priority areas, I spoke about the industry collaboration with institution of higher learning and so on. So really by implementing these, Dr. Mothapo, Africa can accelerate the research and innovation. And as a result, we will be driving growth, economic growth and sustainable development, and we become globally competitive as the continent. Now, as I conclude, no doubt Africa will remain the second fastest growing region globally, with 40 countries set to achieve post-higher growth rates relative to 2023 levels. Working together with other African countries through partnerships, collaboration, we can drive research and innovation, science and technology, and entrepreneurship. The gift we can ever bequeath to posterity is knowledge today. I wish to indicate that greater collaboration between South Africa and Nigeria and the rest of the continent can strategically position Africa as the continent of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Mooroy. A lot of insights, particularly on strengthening Nigeria-South Africa partnerships. I didn't want to, I know there's a lot of questions and comments in the chats, but we also received a few questions from participants when they were registering to hear a little bit about the work that the consulate is doing in Nigeria in terms of strengthening the relationships between our two countries in particular. I mean, I think we have representations from all over the continent, but since you are based in Nigeria and we've had a very kind of tense relationship in terms of diplomatic engagements with Nigeria that have made it a little bit difficult for all of us South Africans to move to Nigeria and Nigerians to come to South Africa, especially for researchers. I've complained so much about the visa challenge, but I think for postdoctoral researchers, it's been such a crucial challenge. In fact, many are not able to take up their opportunities as a result of visa delays. And we lose them. And, we're talking about brain drain. We are already at a loss in terms of the number of researchers who are able to take up the positions or become at risk of losing their positions because of not being able to get their visas on time. And I think for that, I have just one question that maybe covers some of the questions that our members are asking. One would be, what would be the best mechanism for researchers? We know that there has been a backlog on the South Africa side and the whole system is being evaluated. And this is one of the bigger challenges when we engage Home Affairs at home. They explain to us that, because of the system changes and all these delays, because they have to put in more security measures and, approvals and validations and what would be the best mechanism for us to, as universities, to facilitate and make it easier for validating candidates who are approved? And would it be better for researchers to apply from home country, at least during this period of validation, from home country, which might make it easier and have less backlog for them if they're applying from home country to renew or to apply for a new a postdoc visa to be able to come and do research in South Africa? If you can touch on that one first. Yeah. And then the idea around strengthening research collaborations. One of the things we talked about was, would it be better to have more engagement between, at a diplomatic level to discussing about this visa, the research visa, or to start discussing about, developing grants that facilitate this. For example, in Ghana and South Africa, the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation and our DSI have joint collaborations on research, which make it easier for universities to collaborate together, and also with the visa regime, which helps to move. Sometimes you just need to be able to move multiple times for a project over 6 months than to do a visa every time you have to go. And that kind of, visa waiver assists with that. So, in terms of how strengthening research capabilities, that can help. And then maybe a recommendation on the visa application process.
Okay, thanks, Professor. The other meeting has actually started, and I'm chairing it, but I'm going to be very quick. We have created an ecosystem of visa processes. We have become very intentional. We have learned from our past mistakes, and we have made an attempt to correct that. But we are not working alone. We are working with institutions of higher learning. In the case of the University of Lagos, we are working with the International Office, which is the custodian of international students. So all these visa processes are coordinated by the International Office. We discourage potential students to apply individually, but they must be coordinated by the International Office. So what happens is that if there's a group of application for postdoctoral students, we set up an appointment for them with VFS, a visa processing agency that South Africa is using. We do that through the International Office, and they submit their applications on the same day. And they also send their reference numbers, including their names and institutions, to the South African Consulate or South African High Commission through the International Office. And we then adjudicate them on the basis of the required processes. We will do background checks as well, the admission letters for those institutions, medical certificates as well. We look at the finances of applications. If they've got bursaries, we'll look at the credibility of bursaries and whether they will be able to those bursaries will be able to meet up with the day-to-day upkeep. Your medicals, we also check that. And yeah, that's the entire process that we go through. But the long and short of it is that the applications are no longer fragmented. They are organized, and we are doing this through international offices. It has become very difficult to coordinate this individually with students, because we have noticed that individual applications compared to group applications facilitated by the university are normally very difficult to adjudicate, because nobody serves as a gatekeeper. So international offices normally serves as an oversight, because they do the background check. Yeah, I have to go to the other meeting. Can I join you once I'm done with this one?
Welcome. Okay.
Please. There's another. Yeah.
No,
sorry about that.
Thank you. We'll wait for your return. Okay, thank you very much. I noted a few of the questions in the chat and comments, and I will continue to engage with Prof. Mora on those ones. I'd like to hand over back to Yinka so that he can continue with the rest of the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Vanessa, for seeing through that presentation from Professor Moray. I would like to pass the discussion to Professor Sharon Fon to talk to us about experience with postdoctoral training on the continent, and especially what CARTA is doing to support postdoctoral researchers on the continent. Now, one of the major points that I noticed that we could address afterwards is that at the stage of postdocs, I am sure that it would be quite not encouraging when they're still treated as students and not as professionals, having studied for so long a time. But we will address that well, in further conversation. So Professor Fon, over to you, please. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. I also didn't do any PowerPoints or anything like that, just to have a conversation. I'll talk about the Carter experience and then respond to some of the points that two previous speakers have spoken to. So as you already said, Yinka, that Carter is a consortium of universities and research centers in Africa. And we have what we call non-African partners who are engaged in various different ways. But what Carter does is work with the entire knowledge ecosystem. So we work with universities to improve their ability to support research. And our postdoctoral awards are available only to Carter graduates. And Carter graduates are members of staff of the participants in the consortium. Two universities in Nigeria, a research center in Tanzania, Malawi, university in Malawi, two universities in Nairobi, one university in South Africa, and I've left someone out, university in Rwanda, the University of Rwanda. So 7 universities and 4 research centers. And part of the reason why we only offer it to the staff of these universities is because we're trying to build the ecosystem inside universities. So in a way, we're getting away from the problem of what employment they'll have afterwards. They're already employed and we're investing in them. Just to explain what Carter is quickly, in addition to working with the universities, we have the PhD training program. And I think what's relevant about that for our postdocs is that we know what training the people who come into our postdoc program already have. And what's important about Carter is that provides important transferable skills that complement the deep subject-specific skills that you get in your PhD. Importantly, we take a multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach. So knowledge translation, policy engagement. In fact, we also have a section of our curriculum which is on how to teach and how to teach big classrooms, because that's really a big problem often, is that you have huge classroom sizes in Africa. So Carter has enrolled 245 PhD students in 10 cohorts. 181 have graduated thus far, and we track one of their outputs. They've produced collectively over 4,000 peer-reviewed publications. So let me talk about the postdocs now. As I said, they come from our PhDs only. It's a competitive call. It's a 1-year award. The people who apply are externally evaluated based on the quality of the research they intend doing, but very importantly, on the mentoring plan and on the quality of the mentor or supervisor. We sort of tend to call them mentors in postdoc environment, and obviously on their CV as well, because we believe that if they don't go into a well-mentored environment, they will not be able to achieve as much as they can if they do. And I think we heard that from Francois in his beginning, in his first presentation. We do a conventional postdoc, which is 1 year, awarded anywhere in the world. And we also do a re-entry grant, because often staff at African universities or research centers don't have the luxury of going somewhere else. Their employers just won't approve it. So basically, when we do the re-entry grant, we absolutely insist that the postdoc spends some time with their mentor from elsewhere. The mentor has to be elsewhere, and that the mentor has to go to the postdoc's place of employment, so that at least they have some crossover. And when the mentor goes, they shouldn't be engaging only with that postdoc, but with more people within that environment. And in a way, it's our method of trying to get around the fact that it's difficult for African academics to get time off to do postdocs. So our aims in general are exposure to a research productive environment and a different research culture to the one that you come from. We try very hard to break down unproductive hierarchy. So this speaks to the idea of the postdoc being seen as a student. And it also tries to expose people to environments where there's a much more egalitarian relationship of people engaging around research, not people engaging with seniors and juniors. Obviously, we want to build their research and their leadership capability. We want to build their confidence. We have done a review of our postdoc program, and we find that they don't get enough support wherever they go. And many of our postdocs go to Europe, America. So it's not an African problem, it's an international problem. And so we are now starting our own, through Carter, a mentorship program where we are pairing awardees in addition to their postdoctoral mentor with a senior and a peer mentor who provide both academic and technical guidance, but also social support and increase their networking abilities. So I don't think that the postdoc environment is well managed anywhere. Obviously, some places are better than others. One of the things that we do provide to our postdocs is grant writing workshops, which I'll talk a bit more about. Let me just say that we have awarded so far 84 postdocs to our graduates, and you'll see that the bias is towards the re-entry grant, where 56 of these have been the re-entry grant, which is why we introduced it, because we saw that postdocs weren't able to take that whole year off from their employment. We've achieved a 50-50 gender split, men and women. And when we did a survey of our postdoctoral awardees, we found that those postdocs have collectively raised over $19 million in research funding. And this speaks to what Francois was talking about. You've got to instill in people their ability to potentially fund themselves, or at least if they're only getting a part-time salary from a university, that they are able to raise their own grants. So from that, I want to talk about the postdoctoral, our postgraduate grant writing workshop. We have run them for many years now, and we have had 101 women and 83 men participating in them. These are open, of course, to our postdoc awardees, but also to our graduates. That's why the number is higher than the people we've awarded postdocs to. We did a survey of the people who attended our 2002 workshop, and I hope that it is representative of all our workshops. In those, we received responses from 14 people who had attended, 16 had attended, so 2 didn't reply. Between them, they've developed 24 proposals, 11 of which were successful, and collectively they raised $1.7 million in funding. So we have a sense that the graduate grant writing workshop is a product which is helping our postdocs to become the future researchers and research leaders that we hope they will be. I do want to say that on the Carter website, we have both our Carter PhD curriculum, but we also have the grant writing workshop curriculum. And our idea of sharing this in the Creative Commons is that we believe that people, other institutions, could be running these workshops themselves. The entire curriculum and our approach to running it is available to people. We also run a training of trainers workshop where we train people how to run the grant writing workshop. And we also have a training of trainers workshop to help people use the PhD curriculum, because we think that it's possible that other institutions beyond those that are members of the Carter Consortium may want to do this. Carter PhD training and Carter grant writing workshops are open at cost to company, as you would call it, as we don't make any profit from it. But if you would like to send your postdocs to our grant writing workshops, you can. We can easily make ourselves available. And also the way we do our PhD training is that it's 4 blocks of training that is available, we think, at critical times along the entire PhD pathway. So we don't think that the 1-year training in the beginning, that much of the training for doctoral students consists of now, is the right way to do it. It's about 1 month each. And again, if you have funding and because you're not part of the Carter Consortium, you can attend those. So we're open to trying to reach out to more. And I'll give you one example. The University of Ghana is particularly interested in the 3rd workshop that we run. We call them Joint Advanced Seminars, JAZs. And they have asked us to set up and run a JAZ 3 just for them. And we're doing that. So there are lots of ways where we're hoping that as a collective, Carter can assist beyond the Carter family and across Africa. This is really a product that has been developed in Africa by Africans for Africa. I wanted to, so that's as much as I want to say about Carter. We've been going for over 12, 15 years. We've got a tested and externally evaluated set of products that we think work. And we'd love to share them beyond what we've done. And already we are sharing them freely through the Carter website. If you go into the Carter website, it's carterafrica.org. I'll put it in the chat when I'm finished talking, because I'm not so good at multitasking. If you go to teaching resources, you can see what resources we've already made available to internationally to anyone who wants to use it. So that's as much as I wanted to say about Carter. I wanted to make 3 comments. One in relation to the High Commission in Nigeria. Maybe they've changed from what they've done before, but it has been a nightmare to get Nigerians into South Africa. It has been so frustrating. And as I put in the chat, we had a fully funded postdoc from Nigeria coming to Wits University. And because after months of trying to get her visa, we've relocated her to do her postdoc in the UK. It's such a loss to Africa. And I'm so angry about those kinds of things, because there's no doubt that she must have met all the criteria. We just fell through some crack, and it's very frustrating. So I'm so sorry she's not here to hear my complaints. The interesting thing about the comment about teaching, Francois said postdocs don't get an opportunity to teach. You know, it's a fight I have with my own university. I'm located here at Wits. The idea that Wits has is that they should be protected from teaching, and that it's a privilege not to have to teach. But I think Francois is right. For your CV, it's so much better if they do. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to influence the way South African universities see what postdocs do. And there's no way better than to learn your field than to have to teach it. And so I think they should do limited teaching. They shouldn't have the teaching load that other academics have, but I think they should do teaching. And they should also participate in things like project management and research management. So I would agree with him. The other point Francois raised was that you're isolated as a postdoc. You can't find other postdocs. You can't find an academic community to be part of. And I think that that's a recent phenomenon in universities. They've become places that are insular, where people work from home or work behind closed doors. I've just had the privilege of coming straight from a qualitative methods discussion group at the School of Public Health at Wits, where we are doing much more communal things that people can join. And I'll give you one example of when my personal postdoc, who had a re-entry grant, came and spent a few weeks at Wits. And one of the things I said to him was participate in every function. And I made sure that he was on the list and invited to, and I just forwarded every time there was an event happening in my school, I would send it to him. The one thing he came to was our monthly meeting of the School of Public Health, where everyone in each unit presents what work they're doing, and so do the administrators, and so do we have a transformation committee, we have a curriculum committee, all just committees that are available. He was blown away by it, and he's gone back to Nigeria and started that in his own department. A monthly meeting where people get together for 2.5 hours and just say, I went to this conference, this is what I learned, this is the research that my program's doing. So there are lots of ways to make an academic environment a creative environment. And I think that for many departments in my university and across the continent, we don't do it. And I will say, as you know, in the introduction, that I have a visiting professorship at the University of Gothenburg. I had a postdoc at Gothenburg who was lonely because there just weren't enough academic activities happening in the academy. And we in the academy have got to wake up and do more collectively, and do more academic engagement. So that's my contribution to the panel discussion. And thank you so much for the opportunity to engage with all of you. And I'll put okay, there we are. Thank you so much. Yinka has already put the website for me. So thank you, and I'm handing back to you, Yinka.
Thanks very much, Professor Fawn. And it's really interesting to see you follow on some of the things that Francois mentioned. I'd like to just, mention the fact that personally, I've been a postdoc in the UK and in Ireland. And it's important for, while postdocs are not mandated to teach, it's expected that postdocs take agency and take initiative for things they think will improve their own career development. And we can talk about that at the end. So for example, if you are interested in teaching, or you think that there might be a potential career pathway for you in teaching, there's nothing stopping the postdoc from engaging with their PIs or hosts, as some universities call it in Africa, to ask to support teaching in some ways, and with that gain experience, even in supervision of students, where they are formally recognized as, there is a national accreditation scheme in the UK where postdocs could be recognized as associate supervisors. So these are opportunities that exist elsewhere that we could think about, and how we could incorporate them into the system in Africa. So thank you very much. I will then pass on the conversation for the panel to Dr. Boniface to tell us some of the things that the African Academy of Science is doing, especially with some of the postdoctoral programs that the Academy is running. So over to you, Dr. Oji.
Thank you very much, Yinka. And I'm really pleased to be here to have this discussion and to be in this panel. I think it's a very important discussion, and the points that have been made by the other speakers are really important points. I might, in the course of my talking, touch on some of the points, including the one from Francois about the not postdocs not having academic jobs in their institutions and so on and so forth. But for now, let me just say that the African Academy of Sciences is not a research performing institution. It is a research granting institution. So generally, the African Academy of Sciences, as part of its mandates, has three key mandates. Part of its mandate in which funding is provided for scientists across Africa is one in which the academy works to make sure that there is adequate research capacity on the continent, and researchers on the continent are doing research that is of benefit to Africa, that responds to the African Union's agenda. Also, Francois spoke about the Agenda 2063. So we are supporting African scientists who do work that respond to the African initiative, such as the STISA, that's including African Agenda 2063. Currently, we have an ongoing program that supports, in fact, we've run several programs that support postdoctoral training, but I want to speak about one specifically so that it gives you some idea of how the AS does this. And this program is called the African Postdoctoral Training Initiative, otherwise ADEPT. ADEPT is funded by the then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now is the Gates Foundation. A couple of maybe a week or months ago, it's become the Gates Foundation. So it's funded by the Gates Foundation. It's implemented in partnership between the African Academy of Sciences, the National Institute of Health in the US, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as the founder. So how this works is that through a very competitive application process, the researchers from Africa, early researchers, early career researchers, or postdoctoral researchers are selected from Africa, from various countries, not just one country, from Africa. And the fellowship is for 4 years overall. But the first 2 years of the fellowship are spent at the NIH in the US. The researchers, we've selected 30 in 30 of these African researchers into this program, but we send them to the US in batches of 10, so like 3 cohorts. These researchers are sent to the Institute of Health in the US. While in the US, they are paid with principal investigator or mentors at the NIH. So they undergo training at the NIH before coming back to Africa. Now, the path where they have to go to the US to undergo this training is a number of ways. One is based on the fact that sometimes African institutions do not have, say, laboratories or the laboratory equipment for African scientists to do their work here. So somehow people might graduate from the university or finish their PhD without actually practicing or doing anything with the laboratory equipment that they need. Sometimes people have to send their research data to institutions outside of Africa for analysis. So our thinking was that the first 2 years you spend at the NIH give you enough time to learn the laboratory or the techniques, the skills that you need to do, you need for your training. And then after 2 years at the NIH, you come back to your host institution. Now we have the idea that whoever is selected into this program has to either already have an affiliation with an African institution or has a guarantee that when they come back from the US, they will be hosted at that African institution for their research. So when they come back to Africa, they have 2 years to complete the fellowship. In these 2 years, we give them $226,000 US dollars to do their work. Now, this is the part where when there was a comment about teaching.
Hello, ma.
When there was a comment about teaching, $226,000 that we give to the researchers when they come back to Africa, part of it goes to their salary. And when it goes to their salary, we are trying to protect their time from other activities in the university. For example, teaching activities. So we take of the time of the researchers, protect it from the university mandated activities so that they can spend a lot of time in doing their own research that has been funded. Part of that $226,000 also allows them to spend around $50,000 in buying laboratory equipment and maybe establish their own labs. Again, as I said, sometimes people do not have labs and they have to transport and ship specimen and data outside of Africa for analysis. So part of this fellowship provides money for laboratory equipment. It provides money to cover the salary of the scientist or the researcher, some money for the direct research costs. And also part of the fellowship or part of the postdoctoral grants and fellowship is that there's also capacity strengthening as part of that whole engagement. There's another partner organization, RF. RF is the African Research Excellence Fund based in the Gambia that provides leadership training. So the ADEPT program is not just about doing the science, doing the research, but it also trains you on how to do the research management and leadership components of research. And well, I've been at the African Academy of Sciences for a year and 4 months. Before this, I was at the University of Ibadan. I was the African Population and Health Research Center. Now I don't do research, but for maybe 10, 12, 15 years, I was doing research. So I kind of come here, I sit here with the experience of having been the researcher now to the one funding research. And part of what we have found now that I sit here is that many researchers are very good with their research, but when it comes to the research management and leadership components of the work, it becomes challenging. So part of the ADEPT work also addresses things like research leadership management and so on. Now, when the scientists are at the NIH in the US, they also develop their proposals, it helps them to think clearly and begin to streamline the area of research and work that they want to do. So, I mean, that in a nutshell is the ADEPT program. But in talking about people not having affiliations, in the ADEPT program, we've also seen a situation where, yes, the host institution accepts to host the grantee or the researcher, but they do not have a formal job in the sense of a job. They have some kind of contract that allows them to work during the period of their grants. We have seen a situation where one started like that, but in the course of the fellowship, they became they were absorbed in the system. One aspect that has been considered is that maybe instead of taking people who, in fact, the aspect of taking people who are already affiliated with institutions is such that we do not give grants to people that do not have an institutional base to which, an institution that is accountable to the heirs for the money that we have given. Now, This model of postdoctoral training that I've talked about is not just one in which the scientist is sent to, let's say, a welcoming institution for the training. I know during that time you get training, you get your salary or stipend, and then at the end of it, you come back. This one is one in which you get the capacity during the postdoctoral training with the institution, in this case, the NIH. And then when you come back, you get money to actually implement some research. Take the skills that you've gotten from your engagement in the US and bring it back to implement in Africa. Let me just speak also a bit about another program that we run called the ASRICE. It's also the kind of fellowship that we had here at the African Academy of Sciences. It's also a postdoc. It was a postdoctoral program. It's just ended a few months ago. In fact, we took some of the money from there to engage other grantees in another program. In this program, postdoctoral researchers in Africa, I was selected here in Africa and trained and based here in Africa in what we call host institutions. But they had opportunities to go outside of their host institution to another institution and spend between 3 to 6 months for a period in which they can receive mentorship. They can receive what Sharon referred to as the culture of research in other institutions. You can learn the new culture of research in other institutions. You can even form collaboration through that process. That fellowship was not very big. It included only 7 people. 2 of them were from Tanzania, 1 from Uganda, 1 from Nigeria, and 1 from Malawi. The other 2 eventually did not take it up. So these fellows were based in South Africa, in Malawi, in Uganda, and Tanzania, but they had the opportunity to go spend time in Cambridge, to go to Oxford, to also go to, I think, the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, and spend 3 to 6 months. But they were basically based in their host, in the institution that they usually work. And we gave them around $80,000 to do research, with part of the money, again, given for salary, to cover salary, and also separate time for them to do some work. I don't know how time we are doing on time, but I want to speak about one more, and this is called the African Research Initiative for Scientific Excellence, ARISE. This program at the AS, again, is funded by the European Union. Currently, we have 47 grantees in this program. I speak about it because it involves elements of postdoctoral training, but also of graduate training, including master's degree and PhD program. This program gives around 500,000 euro to each of these 47 grantees. Not all of them got 500,000, some got 500,000, some got 400, 450, 300, and so on and so forth. So we select an early career sciences, that they will have had their PhD. And when we award them when we award them these grants, we expect them to train 2 PhD students and 4 master's degree students. And within, they can also hire postdoctoral candidates or postdoctoral researchers to join their team and work with them. The process of selection is highly competitive. I'm sure that if there's anyone in this workshop or webinar who has applied to ARISE, you will know that it is a really tough and competitive process. But then the principal investigator is the one that leads the team within the institution that they are located. They have other people in the team. They can even have people who are more senior to themselves, maybe professors who can be their mentors. They can have postdoctoral researchers who can join their team and do research in the same field that their proposal was approved. I think I can stop here. For RISE, we cover as much as 70% of the principal investigator's time, so that for 70% of the time you do not have to teach. If you have teaching responsibilities that you must fulfill, there is a budget within the project that can allow you to hire staff that can take your teaching responsibility so that you teach, so that you do your research. And this research was not just applied research, it was also basic research. So we have people in this program in terms of quantum physics, you have people in all sorts of green transition, public health, and so on and so forth. I'll stop. If there are questions, I will attempt to answer them.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Shi, for your contribution. I just wanted to check if Dr. Kwashi is able to join us, but if not, I will start by asking a few questions from our panelists, and I will start from Francois. Now, from everything that has been said in this panel discussion, there's a question from a participant asking if postdocs in Africa are worth exploring. As it is in the moment, could you give us some insight? And if whatever your response will be, what are the ways that we could start ensuring, what could we include, or what kind of shifts should we make to ensure that postdocs are worth exploring in Africa? So over to you, Francois. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, because we need to create opportunities. I mean, there's more and more PhD graduates, and they need somewhere to hone their skills further. So I think we do need to explore them. I also think from a funding point of view, I mentioned when I spoke that publicly funded universities are facing funding cuts or shortages, and that means that there's more external funding that they'll be seeking, and that external funding can easily be leveraged to create positions for postdocs. The universities like it because it doesn't mean that the postdocs are on the HR system and come with all sorts of complications in terms of employment. That's a positive thing from the university's point of view, not always so good from the postdocs' point of view because they feel less supported by the institution, and as I said earlier, maybe a bit more lonely and cost adrift from their colleagues. So I think yes, I think what should be done. I think we need to look at existing structures like, for example, ARUA, the African Research Universities Alliance, which is an alliance of predominantly research universities, and one can assume that many of the postdocs in Africa will end up at those universities. That the universities are talking to each other about how to host postdocs in a way that is both productive and a positive experience for the postdocs themselves. So I think more community of practice between universities so that things don't develop in isolation would be advisable. And as I said, I think there are structures through which this can happen. The African Academy of Science as a funder can also play a role. I mean, it's not only universities, but other stakeholders should also be part of that conversation. I think there's an opportunity to almost build from the ground up, since postdocs in Africa, from the data that I've seen, are still fairly new, not that common, more established in South Africa. But as I said, we have our own problems here too. So I think more collaboration and information sharing that will be to the benefit of postdocs should be encouraged. And I hasten to add that should include any postdocs themselves. I find at our university, often the decisions and discussions that are made without postdocs' input. For example, there's currently at Stellenbosch University a process of drafting a postdoc policy, or revising the former policy, I should say. Palesa was instrumental in drafting the first one. but the voices of postdocs are not really being heard in the drafting of that policy. The hosts have most of the power and have a lot of control over what ends up in the policy. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would probably want to just follow up from that question. And for this, I would like Professor Fon as well as Francois to give their insight into the question. So in terms of policies and work contracts, now both of you are in South Africa, interestingly. Are there at the moment policies in place, or are there work contracts for postdocs? And for example, in areas of adequate recognition of the work that they do, things like intellectual property, etc. What is the state of things in terms of policies at the moment? Now, you are in two different universities, so that the insight will be good. So Professor Fon can go first, and then Francois can follow. Thank you.
There are postdocs sign contracts with the university. And Francois was right. The idea is that they should be producing at least 2 publications a year. And he's right that the universities look at it as a cash cow, because in South Africa, universities get income based on their publication output. And their publication output as it increases, they get more money. But in truth, the pie is the same size. So there's not extra money. Just all of us are competing for the same amount of money. It's just the proportion of it that you get. So the amount of money goes down every year that you get per publication. But postdocs are protected, as it were, from doing teaching. And I hear Francois' point, and I think his point about postdocs not being included in developing the contract or the terms is a good one. But they're protected in the same way as other academics are, in terms of intellectual property, in terms of, for example, authorship, first authorship on what they produce, all those kinds of things. They have the same rights as other academics. They are not seen as academics at all. They might not be treated exactly. It depends on the environment you're in. If you're in what I would consider to be a horrible department, you might be treated not so well. But from a rights point of view, you have the same rights as every other academic. And if you are working with a professor who says they should be first author on your paper, you should have the confidence to take that up. I know it's hard, and I know that some bosses are hell. But if you have done the work, you should be first author, and there's guidance on authorship. And people should invoke that and express that right. So they don't, I think they're protected. And if there is anyone on this call who's at WITS who feels that isn't happening, they should be going to the research office, and I'm happy to facilitate that for them if they are not treated as they should be, because that's not, academic citizenship is something that we teach, and it's something that we should be following through on in the way we treat our postdocs.
Thank you very much. That's really enlightening. Francois, over to you.
So I'll speak mainly about Stellenbosch, although I'll just add at the beginning that I'm aware of other universities developing policies, and this is fairly new for some of them. I spoke to someone from Rhodes University the other day that told me that they're in the process of developing their policy. So it's not common for universities to have postdoc policies, but Stellenbosch has had one since, I think, 2015. Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong. And as I mentioned earlier, it is in the process of revising that policy. But it remains purely an institutional policy. That the binding agreement is between the host and the postdoc. So each postdoc has a memorandum of understanding with their host. And the trouble with that is that the host has the power and the power to abuse and ignore the policy. So, we will set in the policy guidelines in terms of minimum amounts for postdocs. And we will see hosts being advertised at amounts lower than what is in the policy. So hosts are either not aware, and that could be simply ignorance on their part, and they shouldn't be held accountable. But I suspect some are aware and don't necessarily follow the policy and do as they wish, knowing that even at a lesser amount they will attract applications. So yeah, policy is there, but not always a very strong lever. I'll also add that, I suppose in terms of rights, yes, postdocs have the same rights as academics, but in practice, as I said earlier, they often feel very invisible. They're not students and they're not staff. And so they fall between stools. And often when it comes to particularly administrative procedures that might sound minor, but actually have a big impact on postdocs, this can be a big problem. And I'll give you one example. Postdocs are required to register as students at the moment at Stellenbosch University, and that's really not what postdocs are. They're not students, but that's the system that the university has put in place. And so we all have to register as students before we will be paid. And so in January, many postdocs are being paid or haven't been paid yet. I'm aware of this, simply because their registration as a student has been delayed. So there's no separate system for postdocs to be managed. And so they're either pushed into the student track, or they're pushed into the staff, or very seldomly, but occasionally into the staff track. And that does leave them feeling very frustrated when it comes to completing certain requirements, but also really impactful things like being paid on time when they have debit orders and rent and things like that to pay. So that's the situation at Stellenbosch.
Okay, thanks very much for your input. I have a question for Dr. Ushi, especially considering that the AAS is a Pan-African Academy. What sort of engagement does the AAS have with universities or university alliances like the ARUA or Association of African Universities, especially in the area of promoting postdoctoral research? That's my first question. And the second question is that there have been lots of conversations that the AAS is leading conversation with the African Union around intra-African mobility for researchers, special category of visas for researchers. Could you comment on this if you are privy to any information on that? What progress has been made? So those two questions, please, if you can. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, let me touch on the question that Sharon was answering about first authorship of postdocs not having voice. I don't know how I don't know why it happens, but when I was at the African Population and Health Research Center, I had quite a few postdocs in my team. So our expectation for postdoc was that for every year, a postdoc should publish two papers. Now, for the postdocs that we are in my team, whenever they had work, they led work. In fact, they had components of, like, I had research projects, and components of that research project would be led by a postdoc, for example. And if they wrote a manuscript from that work, in fact, I don't even know why the mentality is for people to be first author instead of, say, as the senior person, maybe be last author. For me, in my system, the people that have worked with me, you will mostly find me as the last author in papers that I have worked with people that worked under me. So I think every university or every research institution should have processes, should have the guidelines for publication, how contribution, what you need to do to be first author, what you need to be to appear even on the paper at all. all that needs to be brought in. Now, in terms of partnership and collaboration with other African institutions in this sense, for example, the African universities, was African University, what was this called? The center located in Ghana. What is
Association of African Universities?
Yes, sorry, Association of African Universities, and maybe
Arua is also in Ghana.
Yeah.
These are institutions that have worked in partnership with AS to run some programs, some fellowships in the past. So for many programs, the AS work together with this organization. In fact, for some of our programs, the people from this institution are part of the leadership, like the senior, the scientific advisory committee made up of people from this institution. They are represented in the work that we do. Remember that the AS has a mandate by the African Union heads of states and governments to champion, to lead research on the continent. So when we do this, we must work together with partner institutions of like mind. For example, the Association of African Universities and many others. Of course, I know that sometimes partnership, I'm saying this as Boniface, sometimes partnerships are not easy. Sometimes there is a low, like the partnership is on the low burner. Sometimes maybe when there are no activities or no engagement, it's just like friendship. When you've not touched base with each other, the friendship kind of goes a little low. Then when you come back, when there's something to do, it comes back. For the point about visa, facilitating visa or categories of visa, I can only smile because that conversation has been going on for a long time. Last year, we had an event at the African Academy of Sciences where we invited scientists and researchers from many African universities to come. Some people could not make it. I had a former colleague from the University of Ibadan who arrived on the day of the meeting, the first day of the meeting, because, I mean, she's from Nigeria and you would assume that it's easy to come, but it's not easy. Now, in terms of what the African Academy of Sciences is doing, we've been looking at what we call science diplomacy. So saying, if the politicians are not able to handle it, can we come into this picture from the point of view of science? Like, science is what is going to help Africa develop. And so can you create a category of visa, say science visa, that allows scientists and researchers to move across Africa? But not just science. In fact, science is only an angle to say that even trade, these are things that move Africa forward. So how can we make it work? And I can tell you right now, that discussion is slow, is cumbersome, but we have hope that it will work. Recently, we had a few ambassadors here at the African Academy of Sciences, and part of the discussion was a suggestion that all ambassadors, at least those that are in Kenya, where the headquarters of the African Academy of Sciences is, should all be invited to maybe one day of meeting at the Academy of Sciences so that we can discuss ways of facilitating and making it easier for scientists to move across Africa. But for now, it is a dream. It's in a pipeline. Is there an end where we can see it? I think maybe the best people who can answer this are the people, maybe the bureaucrats in the foreign offices or the politicians. But right now, our own is, we are still at the stage of discussing and negotiating to see if it's possible.
Thank you very much for those contributions on how the conversation is going. I'm aware Professor Moroi joined us again. I just want to ask if Palesa could raise some of the questions that relate that he couldn't take when he gave his talk, so that we can have his response to some of those and see how we can further the conversation. And if he also has any follow-on to my last question that Dr. Ushi mentioned, responded to, especially around the possibility of having a special designation for researchers, scientific research visa, is welcome to do that. Okay, over to you, Palesa.
Okay, great. I think he still has also very limited time, but he said that he will just come on and respond to a few of the questions. I think some of them were a bit more technical and will need like a directed to the office. So Prof. Mura, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself, but one of the questions was around the visa renewal process. We didn't get to it on what is the best approach, whether people should renew from their home country, especially for Nigeria, South Africa, if it's easier to renew from their home country, and then it will be better coordinated that way, and then considering the backlog on the South African side. I mean, there have been some concessions made, a waiver that allows people to still, if they have applied and have a receipt that they've applied at VFS, they can stay in the country and continue to do their research and, without any disturbances. But I mean, that's not a long-term solution. So what is the best way for individuals, especially from Nigeria? Is it better for them to apply from Nigeria than in South Africa?
Thank you, Palesa. I think, let me start with the last one. The issue of the waiver is very circumstantial. You can only enjoy the waiver if you have applied on time and the delay is on the part of Home Affairs. And we have already been through that situation. I think in the past 2 years, there were people whose visas had expired, but they had applied on time before they expired. Remember, if you get your visa from us in Nigeria, you go to South Africa, but if you anticipate that you will stay in South Africa longer than expected or longer than your visa requires you to, you have an opportunity of approaching Home Affairs to renew your visa. So if you approach Home Affairs through VFS and you renew a visa and you happen to stay beyond your prescribed dates of your visa, simply because of the delays by Home Affairs, that's when you are given a concession. But if you wait until your visa expires and you apply for renewal, you will not enjoy the concession. In fact, you will be considered persona non grata. So the next time you travel you will be legal in South Africa, and the next time you leave the country, you will be V-listed. And V-listing goes up to a restriction of up to 5 years. Restrictions before you can be allowed to return back to the country. And then the best way of applying for these visas is in the home country. Most of the students, what they basically do is that they make sure that their holiday season coincides with either their holidays. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I don't see you anymore. Okay. Most of them make sure that their holiday season, or they create the holiday season in between, and these are mostly postgraduate students, holiday season in between, so that whilst they come here for a short break, they also make sure that they renew their applications. It becomes easier because we have your records here. You simply submit your application, we tap into your records, then you simply renew. But another mechanism that has been introduced is that we have realized that if somebody is going to South Africa for 3 years, for a degree of 3 to 4 years, and you give them 1 year visa on an annual basis, it's very counterproductive. You know, it actually creates a backlog for us because we have hundreds of students who are studying in South Africa. And if we give all of you 1-year visas, it means all of you are going to come back to us after 1 year, and therefore you contribute to the backlog that we have. So we are trying to align your duration, the duration of your study together with your visa. But we are now also trying to go beyond that, because once you have completed your studies, you must also graduate. There are students who have completed studies in South Africa, but they never had an opportunity to go back and graduate because their visas were aligned to their period of study. But there was no incorporation of their graduations. So they have to come back, be at home, apply for another visa so that they go back for graduation period. And sometimes their graduation pass without them being issued with a visa. So that creates a problem. You go for a 4-year degree, come back, but you are not able to attend your graduation. So we are trying to incorporate those, but it's baby steps. We are learning from the challenges that we are facing. We are constantly trying to improve the services. One of the best processes that we have ever innovated is the collaboration with international offices that I spoke about earlier on for coordination purposes. Have I covered? I think there's one or two that I have missed.
Okay, so
have I covered everything?
Covered. Yeah, that one is covered. I think maybe on the side of South Africa, I mean, working with international offices might be a little bit challenging for us, because I guess in terms of validating or assisting you with who has registered and or who has been accepted at the university in South Africa, it helps better, because you mentioned earlier that you work with, like, for example, the International Office of University of Lagos and so on. But I think on our side, our office is providing a list of accepted candidates from the specific country and giving them to the consular office can help you maybe as a first start to see, okay, these candidates, have been vetted and approved by the institution. And so it's a matter of, just finding the application and making sure that they also check on that side and approve them.
So we actually do that. I mean, all students who are going to study in South Africa at any institution of higher learning will have admission letters. They will have admission letters. We don't require registration because registration and administration are two different processes. So once we have the registration, once we have the application, the letter of admission, we've got established processes in place that we use to verify whether the admission is authentic or not. And we work together with the international offices of various institutions. And in the recent past, the KZN was plagued with a lot of, I'm sorry to mention the name of the university. That university was plagued by a number of fake admission letters. And had it not been of the international office in KZN, we would not have detected that. So the role that the international office plays in assisting to facilitate to the logical conclusion of the issuance of visas to foreign students is quite very, very, very important.
There is a question or a comment in the chat about spouses. So that spouses may be allowed to come and study. I know I've sent you a few requests about people with their families not getting the visas. And of course, that can be quite a stressful thing if you cannot bring your family. What are the conditions around that, especially for postdoctoral fellows?
Families are allowed to visit, but they are not allowed to migrate. Remember, the person who's doing a postdoctoral degree would be you. And if a family would like to visit you and would like them to get a long-term visa, and they are unable to get a long-term visa, we do issue them with a short-term visa. And if a short-term visa expires, they come back, apply for another one, and go back. We do recognize the fact that they've got family members who are doing postdoctoral degrees. But what is completely different is a visa for rare skills individuals. These individuals are allowed to apply for visas for their families, to be with their families in South Africa for a particular period of time. And rare skills visa holders also stand an opportunity of their visa being converted to permanent residence because of the skills that they provide. But we have received a lot of requests in the past where postdoc say that they will be in South Africa for 3 years. Some of them are married with kids and they want to be with their families. I think each and every case is dealt with according to merit, but we do not simply reject because people are not doing postdoc. We may issue a visa, but it may not be a long-term visa. But if it expires, you come back, we issue another visa. And one advantage about being issued multiple visas, short-term multiple visas, is that it adds to your profile. The more you travel to South Africa, the better the chance you have to have a long-term visa.
Okay, so I mean the one question here, which I think is also one of them that I listed, the category of visa associated with postdocs is a visitor visa endorsed for research, and also that it has to be specific to an institution that you're going to be placed in. And the individual here in the chat and also on my notes, this is a bit problematic in terms of what the postdoc program is. Like, why should a postdoc be on a visitor visa? And I mean, I guess it's in terms of what it represents, and the visitor visa with many limitations. In fact, I think in most universities, postdocs do get around 12 hours to work and do other work within the university, such as teaching, which can be remunerated, and this can be 12 hours per week. But the visitor visa actually says you cannot work. And so, I mean, we are already violating that rule. So could you maybe share some insights on that?
No, I don't know whether I understand what the question is, but why would you apply for a visitor visa when you are a postdoc?
Because that is the visa that is allocated for postdoctoral researchers. In the past, they could apply, visitor visa, and it's endorsed for research. And so, it doesn't quite work, I mean, in terms of what the work of the postdoc is. In the past, postdocs could apply for a critical skills visa, but that was also a wrong approach, because the critical skills visa, you have to be employed, and postdocs are not employees within higher education. So.
Yeah, maybe you can just drop me an email about this one. I will ask Home Affairs about it.
Okay. Okay.
I've never applied for a postdoc visa, so I may not be privy to many of these. But you can just drop me an email. I can then follow up and give you feedback on that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yinka, I think
Yes.
we could. I think Prof addressed many of the questions already earlier, and so I think given the time, we should consider doing a wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's
sorry, Palisa, that's
Yes.
what you are asking. That's a very, very critical question, because it does not align to the actual situation on the ground. If you're a postdoc, you must be able to be given an opportunity to do other things that postdocs are able to do. But if you are only given a visa that prohibits you from enjoying or participating in the entire ecosystem, it becomes counterproductive. But I think I must also commend universities for picking up some of these, or also putting into place guidelines that create these prohibitions, so that there's no abuse of the system. So it's important that you send me an email, then I can liaise with people at Home Affairs for them to clarify.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much, Prof. And I think that speaks to one of the importance of having the conversation between those on the diplomatic end and the researchers, because that clarity is very important because it influences how decisions are made. So thanks very much, Professor Murray. I'm sure Palisa will follow up. So in the interest of time, I would like to give our speakers last opportunity.
Yinka, I actually, there is a very important question. I'm so sorry. I have to, like, maybe 1 minute from Prof. Muro. So there was the issue around critical skills visa. And I just want to clarify because people are sending me lots of message about it. Postdocs are not allowed to apply for the critical skills visa. I think maybe when you have the opportunity to review this process, you can relook at that process again because of, you know, the stature of a postdoc. But at the moment, no postdocs can apply for a critical skills visa because you have to be employed. You have to be in an employed position, employed salaried position to have this critical skills visa. And it has to be invitation from a university to say that, you know, you have this unique skill set and so on. There's quite a lot of things that go with it. So postdocs were removed from that category quite a while ago, if I understand. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry,
let me just give you one quick example of some of the cases that we are dealing with. There's somebody from an undisclosed country who went to a university in South Africa, which shall remain nameless. This person was given a postdoc visa. They went there for about 6 months. She fought with the supervisor. Then she withdrew from that faculty and went and applied for a teaching position at the university in a different section, but linked to her studies. And then she was requested to go back home to apply for another visa because she was not there as a teacher. She was not there as a lecturer. She was there as a postdoc. And the basis upon which she was given an opportunity to work there under that faculty were aligned to her visa. But the fact that she moved from that faculty to the other faculty to do something completely different from the prescripts of the visa was actually going to make it difficult for her. So she had to go home. So there are instances where you'll find a postdoc going to a university in South Africa to do something, and then but you also have a large number of individuals who go do their postdoc maybe 3-4 years, and then they get married in South Africa. You know that if you get married for a certain period of time, you are naturalized, you are married, you can renew the. So quite a number of people are doing that, but there are no restrictions in terms of that. These are just practices and trends that we are noticing in the space. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. I think, I mean, this topic, I told Yinka, I was like, oh my God, this topic is going to be a long discussion, and we need a long time to actually address some of the main questions and challenges. So I think in a follow-up, you know, we'll be able to. We've had previous discussions as well on it when we were developing the national postdoc guidelines. And had inputs from Home Affairs, and you know, and tried to outline those also in the guidelines. We'll be happy to share the national guidelines document. We'll share it with you also, Prof. Murray, so you can see the work that has been done previously on at least building a system of support for postdoctoral researchers in South Africa. Yinka, I'm gonna hand over to you.
Thank you very much.
Palisa, before you go, sorry, Yinka. I just wanted to propose that maybe sometime in the future we can have a session where we focus on rules and regulations, particularly for postdoc students, and I can have a Home Affairs official who will respond specifically to each and every question, but also give expert advice.
Yeah.
we have Home Affairs officials here in Lagos who can do that. But I will hear from Palisa if there's an appetite for this. We can do that.
Oh, definitely. Definitely, we're going to do that. Okay. So everybody should be settled now that they will get another chance.
That's very welcome, Prof. Thank you very much for raising that.
Are very personal. I mean, like we need to one-on-one discussions. So, but thank you very much. Everybody's been engaging me here in the chats and on WhatsApp, and so I think it's, you know, there is an appetite and there will be an opportunity, and we appreciate the recommendation and suggestion to do those.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you very much. So I would give an opportunity to our speakers to give their final words on the topic, which is, you know, what will be for us to take away in terms of advancing postdoctoral research in African university. So I would start from the reverse of the conversation. So Dr. Uchi, do you want to go first? Then we have Professor Fon, and then Francois would come last in that order. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Yinka. This was a very nice opportunity to interact. I'm particularly interested in the many questions that have come up, especially as they relate to moving within Africa. It seems, therefore, that Professor Moore has become, he was like, now we've gotten you, let's get you down real good. But it's really interesting because it speaks to all that Africans experience in moving around Africa. But in terms of postdoctoral funding, I wanted to say that it's not just about postdoctoral funding. And my point, in every forum that I have ever been to speak about funding in Africa for African research, I've always said, yes, money can come from the outside world to Africa, but it would be very important for African governments to put money in research. While we struggle to bring funding, for example, at the AS, we struggle to bring funding from the global world so that African scientists are competing amongst themselves in Africa rather than globally. I also want a situation where African government, national government dedicates a sizable or some part of the money to research and use that money to train postdoctoral scientists, because everyone that is going to go through our educational system, the university system, needs this training, because this is the pipeline, the postdoctoral, the postgraduate education and postdoctoral training pipeline that will be responsible for educating Africa going forward, and has always. So that's my take. Let Africans also put money in research for Africa. Thank you.
Professor Fon, please.
I think that one of the things I want to underscore and say with a lot of passion is that Africa, we as a collective have to stand up and be counted. And we stand up and be counted in our space by our innovation, by our intellectual rigor, by our intellectual creativity and curiosity. And we have it. I have had the privilege of working with over 250 PhD students and seen them through their careers. And I cannot tell you how exciting it is to see what people who have the right investments made in them can achieve. Carter graduates have raised money, are PIs of research projects, are leads on international programs, have supervised so many students, both masters and PhDs, have transformed small parts of their institutions and the way that they work in their institutions. There is so much that we can do as a collective. When Carter began, we began because we thought that to provide internationally competitive PhD training, we had to take the best of institutions across Africa. We developed the curriculum together. It was a sense of that everywhere there are bits and pieces of excellence. How do we bring them together to create a collective? And there is so much that we as Africans can do in Africa. And I just want to encourage you, in spite of all the frustrations, and I know there are many, and academic institutions are defined almost by their inertia, but there are spaces to move in. I do a lot of work on decision space. And the notion that decision space, that people often have more decision space than they take. And also something that I often tell my students, that power accrues to those who take it, that agency is so important. And I hope in the way that we support and train the next generation, we create in them the ability and the confidence to exercise agency. And I want people to feel that there is a future because we have to create it together. And I think that in the academic space, it is in training PhDs and in supporting postdocs. And Francois mentioned that postdocs are getting together themselves and creating research, collective research capacity. And I think it's sad that it is necessary, but it's a model and it's a good model, but it mustn't be a replacement model for us as a collective to fight for the right and the place of universities in Africa and to demand accountability and investment from our governments in higher education. They might think they can do it without us, but universities have such an important role to play. So that's my parting contribution.
Thank you so very much. That's very passionate. Yes. Francois, over to you, please.
Thanks. I'll keep it short since we nearly ran out of time and it's hard to follow what was just said before. It's hard to disagree. And all I would add is that we need more of these spaces, more of these discussions. I know today it was quite heavily focused on visas and Nigeria and South Africa, but there's a lot more to discuss in terms of postdocs. That's not to take anything away from the importance of that issue, but there are many more issues, and hopefully we can continue this kind of dialogue to understand better and build better support structures for postdocs across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last comment from me before I pass it to Palesa to close us off is that having had postdoctoral research experience in Europe, I returned to Africa last year, and one of the reasons for setting up RBridge, which is organizing this, is to empower and really enable researchers to develop that agency. So we'll be working with the Pan-African Postdoctoral Network to be able to develop the specific skills that Francois mentioned. In my last role in the UK, I was a research career specialist for careers beyond the academia. So it's not just those who want to work within the academia, there is support, and those who want to develop skills outside of academia, there should also be space to be able to develop those skills. And we will be working together to create future avenues to be able to do that. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll pass it to Palesa to give the closing remarks and close us off. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think it's been really insightful to hear also from the panels and the various support mechanisms that they've engaged and developed around postdocs. I think the problems are same everywhere. And then we also understand the urgency and the agency around, how best to provide support. I mean, I quite liked what Sharon was saying about the, improving support structures around postdocs. And it's been a deep passion of mine that, when I was a postdoc and the experiences that shaped my postdoc journey, and trying very hard to find mechanism to ensure that there is standardization of the support of postdocs, in South Africa and on the continent, and that this can evolve into a space where we see postdocs as, the future leaders in our various sectors of the economy and even in higher education, and that we put supportive mechanisms in place. The visa issue will always take over, but because the postdoc is an international program, we expect people to move around. It's important for the mobility and sharing of knowledge and developing our skill sets and cultural competencies. All of those happen through traveling and seeing, how other parts of the world, how other parts of the continent, do work, and how you can contribute to the innovation of that space. The Pan-African Postdoc Network, started from, the first postdoc forum we've had when I was still at Stellenbosch. And it was, it has grown, and we have a very active postdoc WhatsApp group where, sharing of opportunities happens there. There's an active LinkedIn page where sharing of opportunities also happens there. But we realize that, we need to do a little bit more. We need to find a mechanisms besides getting the postdoc in one place and sharing opportunity, but how do you actually work on building capacity, creating skill sets that enable that transition? Should a job open up, are you ready even to take up such a position? And how do we ensure that you are able to do that? And how postdocs contribute to policy, and all those national, agenda, like how do we contribute to those things, and how do we lend a voice as people who are, part of the future of, the economy, higher education, you name it. All the people that are here now are the ones who are going to be leading in those spaces in their various sectors. And so we are starting to do a platform for postdocs, a dedicated platform for opportunities and training. And so we'll be sharing that. And we'll continue to do the collaboration with ADEPT and RBridge to make sure that we convene like this on very important topics, not just for postdocs, but researchers and emerging researchers within the university sector. We also need various support opportunities to be able to contribute to advancing higher education and commercialization, innovation, entrepreneurship, all of the aspects. Those are needed by our continent. And maybe a word of advice is it's so important that we also familiarize ourselves with continental strategies. So when you are busy with your university work, you should think about alignment to continental strategies, and where will you be in the future, and how you can contribute to shaping the future of the continent, given all the policies and strategies that are already articulated. Where do you place yourself? So thank you very much for making the time. It's been 2.5 hours. It was excellent. The questions were excellent. We're very grateful for the contributions of our panelists. Thank you, Yinka, also for all the brainstorming that had to happen to get this, and identifying speakers. I think it was really excellent. Oh, one more thing is that we normally have a postdoc conference. We have it biennially. So we will soon be sending out a call for joining us on an organizing committee. And we'll be very happy to have a platform again for postdocs to come and present their work and share and learn and develop things. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, everyone, for attending. We will post this and let you know when it's available. Thank you. Bye, everyone. And thanks very much, speakers, for sparing your time this afternoon. Well spent.
Bye. Thank you very much, Yinka. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.